call to order this joint special meeting of the Mayor and City Council, and the Mayor and City Council acting as a successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency of the City of San Bernardino. Before starting, I'd like to take a moment of silence in honor of a community member and partner, Father Patricio Guyen Santoyo. Father Santoyo served as a priest here in this region for nearly 60 years and served as executive director of Libreria del Pueblo. He was a faithful servant of our community and deserves honor. I extend my deep condolences to his loved ones and honor his legacy. Please, let's take a moment of silence. Thank you. Before we discuss the item, I invite members of the public who would like to speak on this item to submit a speaker slip. I do have 3 individuals. Are these all for this item here?
Only one item.
Okay, all right.
I'm sorry, for the next meeting.
Okay, very good. So all these items you're handing me are for now. Okay, very good. Thank you. The item being discussed at this specially called meeting is discussion regarding City Council rules of decorum and limits on elected official comments in the deliberation. The recommendation before the council is that the City Council adopt resolution number 2019-22, a resolution of the Mayor and City Council of the City of San Bernardino, amending the rules of decorum of City Council meetings to set forth time limits for elected officials and their comments and deliberation. As provided in the backup material, I think that there is a great need for civility and decorum, and this is nothing more than a continuation of some of the resolutions provided in the backup. So with that, I will invite our Chief Assistant City Attorney, Sonia Carvalho, to present the item.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The item that you have before you, I'd like to give you a little background on and how it was generated. I was asked to take a quick look at any existing rules or procedures of decorum or operations that the city had. We were actually in the process of identifying those. Our city manager, Miller, had asked our city clerk to identify some of those documents, and we were reviewing them. So what is before you today is a proposed resolution which would address your decorum issues, which would allow the chair but does not mandate the chair to impose limitations as he sees as necessary to run the meeting. We don't have a specific recommendation on this. This is purely a policy issue for the City Council to address and decide how it wants to regulate itself and how and what authority it wants to give to its chair. If you adopt the resolution this evening, it will authorize the chair to do that. I would like to mention, however, that notwithstanding any rules that you might have in the form of a resolution, that at any time, any directive of the chair can be overruled by a vote of 4 members of the City Council. And so you do retain some authority over that as well.
Very good. I'd like to ensure, does that complete your presentation?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
On packet page number 12, the resolution number 2018-88 provides some quasi-judicial meeting rules and provides some clarification on our role there. And on packet page number 9, resolution 2018-89, it provides more of the reasonable regulations for public comments and testimony. I think this tonight's item only provides a little bit more clarity to our overall discussion. This time I'll call public comment forward. Mr. Smith, you're recognized for 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, Honorable Mayor, City Council people. I just wanted to make one point here. It's called Robert Rules of Order. And basically, for how many years has the City Council followed Robert Rules of Order? Robert Rules of Order has said no time limitation on the dais as individuals that are City Council persons or the mayor to restrict their comments to 3 minutes. This is something Frankly, to be very honest about it, out of left field. It's not something that I think our city needs to adopt. I think we've all been elected by our citizens. That was never a campaign issue as far as the 3-minute rule with city council people. I certainly 100% concur that public speaking should be limited to 3 minutes, because obviously we have many individuals that come up and talk about various things, except of course for public hearings, which you allow, I believe is 5 minutes if I'm correct. So I think it's important that we have an open mind to this, that we not just from left field create some unnecessary limitation on how long an elected city official can speak on a certain item. I just have a concern about that. I think we're all adults, and I certainly have not seen that that's been an issue in the past for many, many years. I've known many mayors. I've been here for 70 years, and I've never seen anything like this even come to the dais, because you are elected individuals. You should have the freedom to make your point and not be limited by a 3-minute rule. Thank you.
The next speaker is Rabbi Hillel Cohen. Recognized for 3 minutes, sir.
Mayor and members of the council, I was informed that this was a proposal that you are making, and I would like to suggest to you that we, the voters, those whom you represent, vote you into office so that you will do the best job that you can, not only doing research on all things that come before the city, but also making your views known, and that is not something that ought to be limited by 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. You are elected, I think all of you recognize that, to represent the best interests of the city. And sometimes that takes a longer explanation, sometimes it takes a shorter explanation. You're the ones who have opinions based on your study in advance of things coming up to the council. You ought to be free to express those without any limitation. That does not mean, however, that any of you are precluded from imposing self-discipline. Self-discipline is something which you can say, well, maybe I can say what I need to say in a shorter period of time. We trust you to be able to do that. You are grown-up ladies and gentlemen, elected to office. We just ask you to exercise that self-discipline when you can, and for the best interests of the city, I think that this resolution ought to be defeated. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Shirley Harlan. You're recognized for 3 minutes. Ms. Harlan, welcome.
My 3 minutes, please. Get organized. Okay, started. Honorable Mayor and Council, you know that I frequently am here and I look at the process of this meeting. I have brought with me Robert's Rules of Order, and I attend monthly the only group of parliamentary persons that are studying this and learning it better, and you're welcome always to come with any problems you have. I am reading from page 193, dealing with the issue that you're doing today. Debate takes away the basic rights of all members to full discussion and may restrict a minority's right to present its case. When I looked at your resolution, the word "whereas" in the interest of expediting meetings to afford respect to the time of elected officials. When you took this job, you knew it was a full-time job. Your salary has increased. The time that you're going to spend to research and serve this community, you knew what that was. And to limit it at this time is not helping us in the community. In Robert's Rules of Order, you already have subsidiary motions that you can, in certain situations, you can limit debate or you can extend debate. What I would suggest at this time, because I see a lot of division in the process that you are engaged in learning how to change from a city manager position to what we had before that was in the charter, that you have some meetings where you explore how you could better use Robert's Rules of Order, which is meant for you to be able to understand the issues and share that information and help each other, and as the mayor, to form a team. Now, you may not all agree. That one would not expect you to all agree on each issue. But how you exchange that discussion and debate is important to how you finally make your final resolution. I am not in favor of you making this decision today to have this resolution. You already have many ways to deal with it, and I would expect you to understand that better. And I support both of the comments that have made previous to me. You know, I've been here and I've watched your, I made my point. The 3 minutes is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Harlan. Treasurer Ortiz, recognized for 3 minutes. Welcome.
Mayor, Council, my name is Treasurer and I'm a resident of the 3rd Ward and a candidate for our vacant seat. I and my residents are opposed and concerned about this proposed order, especially time limiting the council. Since my ward is not equally represented, it is up to each of you to put yourself in my and my neighbor's shoes and ask yourself, would you want your elected representative silenced without any say? And that is exactly what this time limit will do. Limit and silence the council, turning it into nothing more than a rubber stamp. We, the people, elect you to have open discussions on our behalf, and limiting that conversation limits transparency and information. You're asking for additional representatives so you can hear from the residents and come back to the dais with community input. But what's the point of that if you don't have the power to speak? The only time the 7 council members can openly discuss city matters together are at these meetings, and yes, that takes time. All residents deserve to hear what each of you have to say until your questions have been answered and you feel you have enough information to cast your vote. I understand the need for a code of conduct. It's unfortunate that we have to put into writing how to speak to someone with dignity and respect. But honestly, that change comes from within, not by time limits. If spending a few hours, 2 days a month, discussing items that directly affect the residents of this city is too much, then holding more meetings may be an option. Or maybe rethink if representing people is the right fit. If staff is having an issue with staying at meetings late, serving in a position that requires them to stay, then this may not be the right career choice. As for the residents, I'm not sure how much concern for them there is when this wasn't put on the regular agenda for a meeting to be held only an hour and a half from now. Probably because if you approve this, your voice will be restricted immediately. You 6 speak for the city, and I implore you not to give up our right to be heard through you. There's nothing in that resolution that mandates that you even have to be recognized to speak, so realistically, you may not get a chance to speak on items. You should never have to ask for permission to speak for the people that you represent. It happened last meeting, and it was an embarrassment to this city and should never happen again. You never get back rights and powers you give away. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. This time, I will go by ward on comments, questions, or statements. Councilman Sanchez?
3 minutes is good enough for the public. I think 3 minutes to get our point across. Our asset to the city is to thoroughly read all the information, to have all the information that we have access to go through that thoroughly and come up with a good decision.
Councilmember Ibarra, any comments, statements?
I also don't believe that this will be any problem, being that we do get the agenda on Friday nights. Our meetings are on Wednesdays, and we have the monthly meeting with our city manager to review agenda items before we come up before you to make a decision. So we read the content, we meet with our city manager. I think, for me personally, since I'm used to speaking my 3 minutes, being part of the public beforehand, I'm used to keeping my statements fairly short on my end.
Thank you. Councilman Charette?
Well, the way we started off is exactly one of my concerns, and that is how we're going to be recognized if this is to be passed. And if we start with Ward 1 and move across, I can certainly respond to things that they've said when it becomes my turn, but I will not be able to respond to things that may be said down the line regarding that particular issue. I'm adamantly against this. I think if we need to review the rules that we're working on, working under, that should be done in a workshop setting where there's really full, robust discussion. This was put on the agenda very, very late. This is not, and with all due respect to our press, the way it was reported in the paper is that this is the leaders of the city are going to review this. This wasn't discussed. This was hit, I think, all of us as a total surprise. This came out of the mayor's office. He's shown earlier that he wants to control how this meeting goes, and I understand that he is the presiding officer of this meeting. However, that is exactly what he is, presiding officer, not the ruler of the meeting, and this is a council meeting that we should be setting the rules on, and discussion certainly many times can be done in 3 minutes or so, certainly less than 3 minutes, but many, many times it requires some extra time or to go back and maybe something that someone had said that sparked a memory or a thought along some other line. This is, as far as I know, just completely off the scale. And though we only have 4 people speaking tonight, it's 100% of the population right now is against this item. 100% of our constituents are against it. Anybody else that wanted to come and speak on it on behalf of it, they certainly are welcome. But right now, the public doesn't support it, and I think all 4 speakers tonight have basically said that certainly their constituents, not their constituents, but their neighbors, their fellow citizens are not in support of this. I don't know why all of a sudden we're trying to expedite meetings. We've moved to start them later. Is that why we need to start to expedite them? Because we've started them later, and so we need to finish earlier, so let's shorten it by doing that. More meetings, not too happy with the idea of more meetings. We have enough meetings, and so far, under the new administration, we've had at least, I think, 4, maybe 3 or 4 special meetings. And if there's a need for a special meeting, then it can certainly be called, and we'll certainly be here to deal with it. But this so far, from what I can see, is not becoming a very collaborative group of people at this dais under the new administration and after the election of the mayor and two additional colleagues. So I'd like to see us be able to maybe, I like the idea of what was the word you used?
Self-discipline.
Discipline. And that is important. I think we should be cognizant of that and do that. But as was mentioned, this is for open discussion and dialogue, and it's critical that we, I don't think just by reading the materials, if we can do that, if we can just read the materials and come in here, there's no discussion necessary at all. Call for the question on all the items. We've read the materials. There's no reason to discuss them, and let's just vote on them. We can maybe do that and be done in 20 minutes and not have to discuss them at all. So I'm absolutely against this. I will not be supporting it. I fear that there is enough here to this evening to make this happen. I'm going to have a hard time adhering to it, frankly. I'm going to have a hard time adhering to it, and I will make my concerns very clear to the public and of my displeasure in this and how how this meeting is trying to be controlled, and it's beyond comprehension. It really is beyond comprehension as to what is going on here. but I think the public is seeing it, and I think it's a real sad day in San Bernardino when we're operating the way we have been in just a short period of time since the November election, or since the swearing in of all the new officers to this board. So I'm adamantly against it. And again, with self-discipline, I'll quit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charette. Mr. Nickel.
Yeah, well, I understand some of the rationale behind limiting discussion. I tend to agree that if we're truly operating under, as we've called it, a corporate paradigm, we need to be thoughtful of ensuring that our meetings are timely and that we're staying on subject and on task. But that said, I do have some questions for our city attorney related to this item. I don't have a copy of the charter. I would like, perhaps, going forward, to ensure that at every meeting, our council members in particular have a copy of the charter available to them, because I think it is absolutely essential that we, first and foremost, abide by the bylaws, the Constitution that has been established by the citizens of the city of San Bernardino. And to me, that should be the North Star of everything we do. If there's any deviation from the charter regarding any discussion or any decision here, then certainly we need to reconsider that. But that said, I do understand that the mayor serves as the chair of this meeting, if I'm not mistaken, based on the Article 3 descriptions of the mayor's. Could we go through specifically what the mayor's role is here?
He's the presiding officer at the meetings.
So a presiding officer. Now, under Robert's Rules of Order, as a presiding officer, I would assume that the mayor has the ability to recognize and or not recognize members of the council, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and the mayor has the ability, if he or she
Just a
so
moment,
chooses.
Mr. Nickel. Ms. City Manager, what are you passing out? The charter. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So my understanding is the mayor, as chair of the meeting, should he or she choose, can limit debate subject to an appeal or a motion by a majority of the council not to recognize such limitation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We have heretofore seen that occur regularly.
So I guess my bottom line question is, what is contained in this resolution that doesn't already exist in the context of the charter as it defines the function of the mayor and Robert's Rules of Order, which establish the decorum and the manner in which the chair is to conduct the meeting? What is contained specifically in this resolution that is not already addressed under the existing charter and Robert's Rules of Order?
I'm sorry. Councilmember, in my opinion, I think the only thing that this resolution does is what resolutions usually do, which they establish policy. They're not, resolutions aren't law, they're policy. And I think if the council were inclined to adopt this resolution, you would be acknowledging as a group direction to your chair, right? Because he has these authorities. I would like to specify also that we use a modified version of Robert's Rules. We don't use that.
Correct.
League of California Cities actually recommends acknowledging Rosenberg's rules. They're a little more understandable for a layperson. I think I'm more accustomed to using that. They're somewhat similar. They're written by a former judge, Rosenberg. But I want to make sure that's clear. We do
Have
not
we
strip-
adopted Rosenberg's rules? Because I think the
We have not.
Okay, because I think my biggest concern is that we're getting into areas that I think are actually already addressed to some degree by both existing practice and the charter. And I want to make sure that we aren't reinventing procedure that is already more or less available to the discretion of the council and the mayor. But one other thing, and I will wrap up my comments. I do think that one of the things that we are missing, I will say this, and I know that the agenda item refers to a number of council actions that have been taken and rules that we've established, both in terms of the code of conduct to govern our behavior and so forth, which I think are all great. But the problem is a rule without a mechanism of enforcement is nothing more than a piece of paper. And I think what we are really missing here is a mechanism, if and when a member of this dais deviates from the rules of decorum, that there's a mechanism for censure, that we can have some mechanism to ensure that people just don't go off the rails and abuse their seat here at this dais. So what I would recommend, rather than more or less creating a new resolution that more or less restates a lot of existing procedures and rules that already exist, perhaps what we really need to look at is a process for censure should any member of this dais deviate from those existing rules and process and procedure, to ensure that there's accountability on the part of each and every one of us, that we are not going to disrespect each other or the function that we hold as members of this dais. So I would like to ask the city manager, are there such rules for censure that we could perhaps explore? Are there other cities that have some kind of a censure procedure? I believe Ontario censured one of their council members because of unacceptable behavior at the dais. I understand other councils have done that. Might we do that?
Yes, you might. And just for the full disclosure, these books are something that you had mentioned to me a few days ago. Amory has put those together. We not only included the charter, but some of the other relevant things that you've adopted related to quasi-judicial meetings and a whole host of other things. So again, what we have attempted to do is to create for you a reference guide. I think that was a good point. So you have that before you. Cities do have those kinds of things. We can certainly research those. I know several cities right in this region have provisions related to enforcement mechanisms. I would note that you do have oh, I thought you were telling me to quiet. That there are a couple of places.
No, it's just eating into our closed session,
I'm sorry.
but we can wait it out.
I'm hurrying. I will speak quickly. There are a couple of places, though, where you do have some provisions related to enforcement, so I would want to just do a quick check so we're not duplicating something. Like, for instance, if you go to the second tab, it's page 94 of that ordinance pertaining to meetings. There is a fine that the council can impose on the mayor or any of its own members of $50. So I think before we recommend some kind of censure, we want to just check where you've already provided enforcement mechanisms and then come back to you with a policy for recommendation.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem, Richard, any comments?
Thank you. What I want to say, start off with saying first, I want to thank and appreciate all my council members that have spoken before me. And you guys all have good suggestions, and I appreciate that. One of the things that I want to say that I don't believe that 100% of the people in the city of San Bernardino disagree with this. Not 100%. So that's not true. And I want to also acknowledge as a group that we make sure we put into place that the mayor runs the meeting. And so saying this, I really truly believe that this is something that needs to take place. I said in the last council meeting how I was just embarrassed by the actions that were taken. Every time you have new members, there is change, and we have to stop be resistant to change. If this is already written, then let's go ahead and let's adopt this right now on a temporary basis until
Andrea.
Well, I have a lot of bosses, and I do have an Angela, that I work with. I shouldn't say that. But Andrea comes back. And I know that there are other cities that do this. We're not the only city that a lot of people are saying, oh, no, this is unheard of. This is all unconstitutional. There are other cities that have imposed things like this. The only thing that I say, I want to move this for approval, but the only thing that I want to say with maybe one change, and maybe we tweak it a little bit and maybe give each council member 5 minutes. There's already in here where if somebody needs to speak a little longer on an item, you can do that. But to limit some of the back and forth and the talking about the same things over and over and over, and the redundancy and repeating yourself. This is for healthy dialogue. We're here for healthy dialogue. I know one thing Sandra said is that we get our agendas on Fridays. We get our agendas on Fridays. We have the opportunity to read them over on the weekends. The city manager makes herself available for questions on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We also have agenda review meetings, so there's things put in place so that way we can ask the questions, so when we come, we can have healthy dialogue within 5 minutes. There's no reason why we're having a conversation, all your questions are answered, so now let's just sit and conversate, but it doesn't take everybody taking 15 minutes. I believe the last meeting, well, we talked to one item for 3 hours. You know, right now, we can't even, we're supposed to start closed session at 4 o'clock, and here we are going over the time. And I think that we need to think about that. It's not that we're not discussing the things and that's related to the city. It's not that we're not talking for our constituents. What we're doing is we're having respect for other people's time. And I think that that's very important, whether it be my time. I know that I'm in this position, I work a full-time job, and I don't mind being here. But what I'm saying is not just about me. It's about the constituents that can't stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning to watch the meetings. They want to see the meetings. It's about the staff that sits here that start an early day. It's about them. It's about the people. We want more people to come and sit to the meetings and come and talk. But if they know that we're going to do all the talking and we're going to talk all night long until the next morning, we're doing a disservice. I think that we can have healthy dialogue within 5 minutes. So I want to move to approve this item with that change to 5 minutes, and until Andrea can come up with other solutions.
Very good.
I second that motion.
So for clarification, on packet page number 6, third sentence, 3 lines down, the resolution shall read 5 minutes at any one time, and there is a recommendation on the floor to that stead, and I hear a second from Councilmember Sanchez. So, Mr. Mulvihill?
Mayor, I'd like to be heard after Mr. Mulvihill, please.
Mr. Mulvihill, go
Well,
ahead.
I'm personally appalled by being limited in terms of the discussion. I don't think I usually run over with my comments too much. But the point is that in many cases, we've done the research, hopefully. I mean, I think as Councilman Sanchez mentioned, you need to read your agendas, before you bring up questions. And so with that in mind, the point is that you've read the materials. You've been here for a while. You understand the implications of it. And so you're limiting discussion, again, it's up to the chair's prerogative to establish some sort of a closure time for an individual. But the point is, yeah, it's just appalling to me to set a general end. And who's going to keep time?
The city clerk. According to
But
the
the point is,
resolution,
we've got 6.
according to the resolution, the city clerk.
Are you going to have 6, Ms. City Clerk? 6 individual and presumably 7 individual clocks? Because again, once you get
assuming
through
you're
the
not all
first, once
speaking at the same time.
not finished yet, not finished. Once you get through the first cycle and the person hasn't taken all of his 5 minutes, and he has a comment to make about what Mr. Sanchez and Mrs. Ibarra said, how much time do they have? How are you going to know that?
My office is prepared to keep records of the meeting as we have for all meetings, and if it includes timekeeping, I'll do it much like I do other note-taking, which is I write down times and names and subjects.
Sounds to be kind of complicated. But life is not easy. Thank you.
So,
Mayor, I'd
hold
like
on,
to-
Mr. Sines.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
No, Mr. Sines, hold, please.
Oh, okay.
Ms. City Attorney, can you share with us what other cities also implement this practice? This is not some type of left field idea. It is new to us, but times are changing, folks, and our council meetings, with the approval of tonight's resolution, will be moved back to a later time. And so last council meeting on January 16th, we got out of here almost close to midnight. So, Ms. City Attorney, if you could provide some insight on what other cities.
I can't give you a specific list. There are many, many cities that develop these rules of decorum and operation. I think what's most important is that these types of resolutions are only adopted when there's a consensus of the council that they want to be explicit with the amount of time that they want. Because as has been previously stated, your charter already gives the chair of the meeting explicit authority to do this. I think these types of resolutions, that when you see them, in my experience, I've really only seen them with bodies that have 7 or more members. They're not typical when you see smaller councils, which general law cities generally have about 5 members. It's a little easier. But you do see them with larger bodies, and it's just a way to try to manage the meeting. But it is a statement of policy. It's whether you all the chair can do this as he wishes. He could give each of you 2 minutes if he wanted, and then it would take a vote of 4 of you to overrule him. This is just an explicit way of being transparent about whether you want to impose this on yourself or not, and it's a policy decision.
Thank you. Mr. Sines?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and please bear with me. I've had a cold and flu, and I'm still under the influence of NyQuil, I think, from last night, but I jotted down some notes I'd like to share with you this afternoon. And although this does not violate the letter of the Brown Act, I think there are some serious concerns from a legal perspective that you need to be made aware of before you vote on this. The first of which is that I think there are some serious issues with the spirit of the Brown Act in terms of this item. And number 2, there are some, my concerns is that it opens the door to future violations of the Brown Act. Going back to number 1, the spirit of the Brown Act. The spirit of the Brown Act is identified and written in section 54950 of that act, and I'm going to edit the important part for purposes of this discussion. The legislature finds and declares that the public councils exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. Key word there is deliberations. And I want to focus on deliberations for a moment. It's been said that everybody comes out and gives some kind of almost a speech. We're going to hear 7 speeches for 3 minutes, perhaps 5 minutes, and then we're going to take a vote on it. That, in my mind, is not a deliberation. A deliberation takes place in discussion over time. It's an exchange of ideas. You bring new concepts that someone may have not have thought of by reading the materials. Those are very important discussions that need to be had in an open forum, not prior to the meeting. I like to refer to a jury, and the law requires that a jury deliberate, not just listen to the evidence and have an idea on guilt or innocence in a criminal trial and then go back and vote, and that's the end of it. The law requires deliberation, discussion. If they come back and tell the judge in 5 minutes we've reached a verdict, the judge will tell them to go back in there and deliberate, which brings to mind the movie 12 Angry Men. Most of you have probably seen it. It's a very good movie. 11 of those come in, all having heard the same evidence or the same counsel packet book, all having heard the same. 11 of them are on one side. On the guilty side, one person has some doubts. He raises those doubts, deliberations begin. Moving to the end of the movie, they find the defendant not guilty after serious deliberations. Deliberations have value. Deliberations are important. We're talking about the people's business. They need to listen to the deliberations, hear the respective positions of the council members, of their electeds, and that business needs to be conducted publicly. Deliberations have very important value. I think that's why they chose the word here in the Brown Act, deliberations. So I think there are serious considerations with the spirit of the Brown Act with respect to this issue. With respect to the opening the door to violations, I believe we have all seen situations where there are prescripted notions or ideas that come forth in acts on the dais, representing conversations and discussions and decisions that have taken place prior to the meeting. That's a violation of the Brown Act, in my opinion. Those discussions, those exchange of ideas, those sharings, those suggestions that are shared among council people or members of the dais, those sharings need to happen in open session, not behind closed doors. To the extent that violates the Brown Act, it's very problematic. I think this idea opens the door to that. I see people calling one another prior to the meeting and saying, this item, I don't like it, or I like it for this reason or that reason. The discussions are taking place outside of the public domain. I think that's very problematic. Excuse me for just a moment. So I'm very much concerned about those types of discussions. We've heard them sometimes referred to as backroom discussions or backroom deals. It's a very negative connotation, and it should be, because those discussions and agreements and understandings among council people and the mayor should take place in an open session. And that's the risk I see, a legal risk for the city, and that I'm concerned about, and that I'm suggesting that we want to avoid that kind of risk from actually coming to fruition and coming to be by staying with the rules that we presently have. The mayor has control. I think you ought to use that control appropriately and reasonably to control the time of the meetings, and I think that works sufficiently. So finally, although the Brown Act, this does not violate the letter of the Brown Act per se, I believe it flies in the face of the spirit and will likely lead to actual Brown Act violations. All business should be done openly and transparently, consistent with the spirit of the Brown Act. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. At this time, the chair, the chair will recognize Tim Prince for 3 minutes. Mr. Prince, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, for that courtesy. The one right in front of me. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the council, ladies and gentlemen of the public. The Brown Act was a difficult sell for this city from the beginning. My father was elected city attorney in 1959, way before the Brown Act. And when he brought that new law to the table, you would not believe, it's somewhere in the annals of the city clerk's office, the videotape of how the council members were, Ralph, you got to be kidding. We can't discuss this in private. You know what they did? When faced with having to have an agenda, follow their agenda, and discuss things in public, they said, we're going to hire an outside lawyer because this elected city attorney obviously is being a little too strict. Well, the rest is history. We've become an open, public, and transparent city with a history of citizen participation. Let's keep it that way. You all up on this dais hold the public trust. You're not just ordinary citizens. You are expected to study the issues. You are expected to know more than Mr. and Mrs. Public that has a full schedule outside of council meetings and other responsibilities. You've taken on this job, and it's worth more than 5 minutes. Don't abuse your privilege and your responsibility. Don't be rude to each other. Don't repeat yourself 14 times. We have a mayor who's on the ball, who's on the task, and can regulate that conduct fairly. I've been impressed with our new mayor's comportment, decorum, etc. A couple of you have had some squabbles. That's nothing new in this city's history. Our best years are when we discussed matters in public, when we had public disagreements. Sometimes they were a little bit ugly. But you know what? The citizens loved it. They loved that exchange. They loved that dialogue. Don't give that up. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to encourage our city council to consider packet page number 5, I'd like to address some of these issues that were raised by Mr. Mulvihill, Mr. Charette, and others, that the following rules contained here in the floor motion shall apply to elected officials, and in addition to, the operative word is in addition to the existing rules relating to decorum. So the floor motion made by Councilmember Richard is to amend 5 minutes from 3 minutes to 5 minutes, and that is reflected on page 6. And there was a substitute motion on the item, and I'd like to call for the question.
Could I have one comment, please?
We will take a roll call vote on it.
Mr. Sanchez?
I second. Yes, the motion.
Right. So I'm doing a roll call vote, so I assume that's a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Ibarra? I'm sorry, can you state that?
Yes. I'm under the weather, sorry.
Mr. Charette?
No.
Mr. Nichol?
No.
Ms. Richard?
Yes.
Mr. Mulvihill? No. The item fails. It's a tie.
It's a tie, and I will break it in
And
favor
then
of the
Mayor-
motion. Thank you. We will now recess to closed session.